Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Montgomery County House Delegation weekly meeting. We have a full agenda today. Senator Van Hollen will be joining us closer to 10 o'clock as our briefing speaker. Before that, we have a few bill hearings and other matters to deal with. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Chair of our committee, Delegate Shetty, to go through our first bill, MC 2422. Chair Shetty.
Thank you, Chair Corman. This morning, we will start with MC 2422, Montgomery County Board of Education, Data Disaggregation Policy and Racial Disparity Comparisons. This was requested by Delegate Shi, so I will turn it to her for her sponsor testimony.
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you, Chair Shetty. And I just did quickly look at the email. Thank you very much for alerting me of that. That's very helpful. I'm Delegate Lily Chi here to present MC 2422. I first want to thank all of you for approving the late file bill. MC 2422 simply codifies what MCPS leadership verbally told us they would do, which is to separate Asian American student performance data from whites and all others for farm and non-farm students in their analyses and the reporting and the policy briefings. Specifically, it requires that MCPS Board of Education to adopt a data disaggregation policy to include a category for Asian American and Pacific Islanders, just as it did with the African American and Hispanic students. I appreciate my colleagues, Delegate Barbie and Delegate Moon for co-sponsoring this bill. As you may recall, during our this past year's annual briefing with MCPS leadership, Delegate Barbie first raised the question, and I also asked a follow-on question about this issue. It might sound unbelievable that in 2022, we still need to remind anyone, let alone one of the most progressive institutions that prides itself on diversity and inclusion, that Asian Americans are not only racial minorities, but that we experience systemic racism and personal discrimination. Montgomery County today is majority minority, as we already know. In fact, the county itself has enjoyed that status for a decade, since 2010 census. Among the three major racial minority groups that make up slightly over half of the county's population of over 1 million, Asian Americans are actually very comparable in size to the other two major minority groups. Maybe to some people's surprise, within MCPS, 14% of the student population are Asian and growing. And the 2020 census showed that Hispanics and Asians are leading the way, not only in Montgomery County, but in Maryland in general. And Asian Americans are the fastest growing population in America, period. So contrary to public perception that Asian Americans are doing well and can quickly achieve their American dreams, no matter where they came from or what language they spoke, we actually have the greatest socioeconomic disparities within our community, more than the whites, blacks, and Hispanics, because we are a super diverse group made of dozens of communities, even within Montgomery County. And these disparities are naturally reflected in student performance. Combining Asian American data with whites and all others, as you probably recall seeing on this chart that each of us were given during the briefing, simply reinforces the model minority myth and overlooks the struggles of Asian American communities, especially given the fact that over 70% of the Asian populations here locally are immigrants, with most speaking English as a second language, just like I do. And worse yet, it pits one minority group against the others, because people can point to Asian Americans' scores and income and say, see, if they can do it, why can't you? It just simply drives a wedge within the minority communities. As someone who spent years in Montgomery County government, improving language access, cultural competency, and awareness of the immigrant communities, I was frankly shocked and very disappointed that MCPS did not bother to analyze and report Asian American student data the same way it did with other students. MCPS leadership said it actually tracks the performance of all student groups, but they just did not analyze and report it. So what you choose to analyze and talk about influences public opinions and public policies, which is why this bill is needed to codify what they said they would do, which is not only to track, but also to report and analyze and present it in the policy briefings. So thank you very much, and I urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Delegate Chi. We will start with questions. I will turn it to Chair Barve, please.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. Contrary to the beliefs of some people, we Asian Americans aren't just functional white people, and I'm very happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Moon.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad they brought this bill forward. Also happy to co-sponsor it. I have nothing more to add to what Delegate Barve and she said, other than on its face, this policy is weird.
Noted. Thank you so much, Delegate. Any other comments or questions? Okay, great. We will turn to our first witness here, testifying in his individual capacity, Jay Guan.
Hi, how's it going? Mic check?
Yep, we hear you. And just a quick heads up that you should see on your screen a 2-minute timer. It will begin when you begin.
All right.
Thank you.
See it. All right. Hi, dear Montgomery County Delegation. My name is Jay Guan. I'm a resident of Clarksburg and the father of one who is in elementary school at the moment. And I'm here to testify in support of MC 2422. Throughout our nation's history, Asian Americans are rendered invisible through various means and for various purposes. The recent trend of grouping Asian American with whites in disparity studies and other demographics studies is but a continuation of this practice. In addition, this practice further perpetuates the damaging model minority myth. For the uninitiated, the model minority refers to the persistent stereotype that paints Asian Americans as inherently successful and problem-free. It further characterizes Asian Americans as polite and law-abiding who have achieved a higher level of success than general population through some combination of innate talent, hard work, and family values, despite the systemic racism they face. This myth ignores the ethnic and socioeconomic diversity and disparity within the Asian American community. It also erases racism experienced by various Asian American ethnicities throughout our history. Perhaps more importantly, the myth is often used by white supremacists to counter the argument of systemic racism against African Americans, to perpetuate anti-Blackness narratives such as hard work and overcome all, etc., and to drive a wedge between people of color by setting up a hierarchy of sorts. Thus, it is extremely disappointing and baffling to see MCPS and other institutions push on with this practice. It is woefully inappropriate and go against our drive for cultural proficiency. I urge the Montgomery County delegation to vote in favor of this bill and rectify a wrong. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your compelling testimony and for joining us here today. Rebecca, would you mind minimizing, or so we can see everybody? I can't see if there are questions. Actually, we're going to go to the second witness first, and then we'll take questions in the order in which they are requested. So the next witness is Jason Maxstein, testifying in his individual capacity. Is he here?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, and
okay.
2 minutes on the timer. It will begin when you start. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for having me today. My name is Jason Maxstein, and I'm here to testify in support of MC 2422. I prepared a shorter spoken testimony to go along with my written testimony. While working as an education advocate, it has come to my attention that in many cases, MCPS and the Board of Education have been discriminatory in their handling of Asian and Pacific Islanders in data sets. They've been discriminated against in that racial ethnic data breakdowns at times group their racial group with the white race and other races. Today, I will discuss two specific examples along with why I don't think this is right. The first example is the equity accountability model used by MCPS. Here are the 5 focus groups listed: non-farms Black or African American, non-farms Hispanic Latino, non-farms white, Asian, and all other groups, farms Black or African American, and farms Hispanic Latino. The second example is last year during the MCPS presentation to the Board of Education on return to school parent preference survey. There were a large number of breakdowns, including the 5 focus groups previously listed, as well as about 16 other groupings and non-farms, Asian, white, and all other groups. In MCPS, Asian is by far the fourth largest racial group and deserves to be represented on its own in data. 14.1% of students are Asian alone, which is over 22,000 students. As part of my work on last year's Montgomery County Council Redistricting Commission, I got an extremely detailed look at the county's geographical demographic patterns. The areas in the county where Asians are most predominant have a high proportion of people speaking English less than very well, much like a lot of the equity focus areas, and have a moderate amount of low-income households. In my written testimony, I've highlighted planning documents that show this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maxine. We appreciate you joining us here today, and your compelling testimony was wonderful. Thank you. Recognizing Delegate Lutke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And these questions, I think, are probably for the sponsor, Delegate Chi. I'll echo the previous comments of support, but I have some technical questions I want to get a little clarity on. One is under the census and federal OMB definitions, there's a differentiation between Asian and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander. Is that I guess in the bill, it's all one category. So should we be looking to differentiate that into two categories, or is there a reason why we would just include it in one?
Thank you. That's a great question because Asian American population, and we use the term Asian Americans loosely, sometimes inclusive of the Pacific Islanders. Sometimes we want to be more specific by saying Asian American and Pacific Islanders. Just for the sake of inclusion, we say Asian American Pacific Islanders because the Pacific Islander population in the greater Washington, D.C. area is like less than 0.1%. So we just usually put them together instead of a separate category. And in the email that MCPS just sent me and the Chair Shetty forwarded me, I think they called it out and they wanted to, let me go back to that email, I think they wanted to do something different about the Pacific Islander population or something, right. Or maybe it was not technically feasible to actually have meaningful data reporting on that because it's such a tiny population. But we do have Pacific Islander communities here. They are just much smaller compared to the other ethnicities.
Gotcha. Okay, so I mean the issue is it's small enough it wouldn't be statistically significant in some of the. Okay.
Yeah, I would assume so, but I think it's an issue that we should just leave it to the Board of Education to decide how they can best do that. I don't think we should be prescriptive on that issue.
Okay. And my other question is, this is a local bill. This applies to MCPS. I have to imagine that if MCPS has been having trouble keeping track of this as a disaggregated category that other school systems have you considered doing a statewide bill to make sure all of our school systems are doing the same thing?
Thank you for raising this concern. Yes, I thought about that. Actually, I have another bill related to American Studies. And in our team's effort to understand which county is teaching our kids about what part of American history, it is shocking. So many of them, actually, to my satisfaction, 15 of the 24 counties bothered to respond to our survey. But it's also disappointing. So many of them counted histories of China and India as Asian American history, for example. So that speaks to the overall cultural competency or lack thereof of our leaders who have a say in the curricular development and understanding the students' population probably also, right? So it should not be surprising to us that we need to do that statewide probably at some point, Sure. But to your point, I'm just thinking of my other bill in relating to government cultural competency and the student curricula and all of that, right? So I think these are all aggregate issues that we should systemically address,
I agree. I'll just conclude by saying that if a statewide bill were brought to Ways and Means, I would be very happy to vote for that. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any further questions from members of the delegation? Seeing none, thank you, Delegate Chief, for bringing your bill. Thank you, advocates, for joining us this morning. That concludes the testimony and bill hearing for MC 2422, and I turn it back over to the chair.
Great. Thank you, Chair Shetty. Obviously, that bill will be taken up by your committee shortly. Let me now turn to the Land Use, Transportation and Public Safety Committee. Chair Love for a bill hearing on MC 25-22.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. We are turning to the bill hearing for MC 2522, Deer Hunting Sundays, requested by Delegate Fraser Hidalgo. Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm here today to introduce MC 25-22. And for those that have been around for quite a while, back in 2017, we put together a bill to help address the deer population or the overpopulation in Montgomery County. There's been a lot of bills that we've put through. But in this particular case, we kind of negotiated a Sunday morning bill. So just during hunting season, that hunters could go out on Sunday mornings and just hunt for a few hours until 10:30 before they have to hop out of the woods and let the equestrians and the hikers and the bikers have the rest of the Sunday to themselves. So it was a pilot and it was due to expire, and expire it will. And so all this bill does is make permanent the pilot. It's been a successful pilot. There's a lot of deer that are taken out on Sundays. It's over 8% of deer during the hunting season are taken out just on those few hours on Sunday mornings, which is kind of incredible because it's not a lot of time, yet they do take a lot of deer out at that time. And for those that aren't aware, we have about 31,000 traffic collisions every year in the state of Maryland with deer, and there is millions of dollars worth of crop damage done to our local farms, and I think you'll hear more about that. So with that said, that's all the bill does. It just removes the sunset. If there are any questions or if there are other witnesses, I'm happy to take it, Madam Chair, any way you want to.
Thank you, Delegate. Why don't we go through the two folks who have signed up to testify in support of the bill, and then we'll move to questions. The first person we have is Peggy Dennis on behalf of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. Go ahead, Peggy. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, one and all, and particularly thank you to Delegate Fraser Hidalgo for being such a standard bearer on this important issue. I just raised the fact that the Potomac Conservancy has, in their most recent communication, mentioned that, that thing in front of my screen threw me for a loop, that the warmer winters we're having will result in a greater number of ticks and deer ticks, so we should expect more Lyme disease. That's a great public health reason for wanting fewer deer, particularly in the suburbs. The Civic Federation has a longstanding policy of supporting measures that liberalize archery hunting, and I emphasize archery hunting because we don't want guns or firearms of any sorts in the suburbs. Archery hunting is extremely safe, very quiet, and it does not disrupt or disturb the local neighborhoods. Since the Sunday hunting has been allowed, there have, to my knowledge, been no reports of problems or disturbances involved with Sunday hunting. So we fully support MC 2522, and we would only ask that in the future, this may be made even better by allowing dusk hunting also on Sundays, say from 4 o'clock until 30 minutes after sunset. This would allow more hunters to enjoy the sport and do their civic duty, because this does provide lots of venison for our hungry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will turn it over to Jerry Garson on behalf of the Seven Lock Civics Association. Jerry, you have 3 minutes.
Members of the Montgomery County Delegation, I am Jerry Garson, the president of Seven Lock Civic Association, Inc., asking for a favorable report on MC 2522, a bill for the purpose of authorizing the Department of Natural Resources to allow persons to hunt deer using bow and arrows during additional time periods on Sundays in Montgomery County and generally relating to Sunday deer hunting in Montgomery County. We have been having problems with a large number of accidents between deer and motorists in the county, including some fatal to residents. We also see deer carrying some diseases, including COVID-19 and Lyme disease. There is evidence that white-tailed deer have been exposed in several areas in the United States and Canada. Deer with the virus or antibodies against the virus have been found in Illinois, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, Oklahoma, Ohio, and in Ontario and Quebec, Canada. We do not know if deer in Maryland have COVID-19 since there has been no testing of deer killed in Maryland to our knowledge. In an article by the Associated Press on January 12, 2022, it stated that we do not know at this point every place that deer have been tested. There have been antibiotics found. Whether it's transmitting among deer populations, whether they're contracting it somewhere in the environment or any other mode that they are getting it It is transmitting regularly to deer. The idea to test deer started with a National Academy of Sciences study that noted that certain protein receptors in white-tailed deer and other animals could make them vulnerable to the virus. Scientists at the National Wildlife Research Center decided to test the theory by analyzing samples from 4 states and discovered 40% had COVID antibodies. Therefore, for public health safety, we should reduce the deer population in Maryland. We have spoken to residents who grow their own food and have many reports of significant damage to food and ornamental plants in our area. Many residents reporting seeing deer in the yards and in Cabin John Regional Park. The deer have done significant damage to the park, and the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission has arranged for sharpshooters to cull the deer in the park. In light of all these problems with deer, we recommend the passage of this bill. If the legislature wants to amend the bill to expand hours on Sunday, we would have no problem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. There are no further witnesses. Are there any questions for the sponsor or any of the witnesses? Okay, I have a question, seeing no others. Delegate Luke, would you like to go ahead?
I'm happy to follow on you, Madam Chair, if you'd like to go first.
Sure, I'll jump right in. Thank you. Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, the hours were a tightly, intensely negotiated piece. Isn't that correct?
That is absolutely correct. It took, I think Delegate Lutke may remember some of this, but it took 4 or 5 meetings with everybody around the table and just a lot of very touchy negotiations to create these hours.
And am I correct? The reason for that is because there are a lot of other people who are out who want to enjoy nature, bird watchers, hikers, equestrians, who were very concerned. You know, there is Saturday hunting, and if you allow Sunday hunting, then you're getting a lot more interaction with these people. There's a lot less opportunity for them to be out and enjoy the space. So it was a compromise that people came to ensure that there was Sunday hunting, but that there was also enough time for other people to enjoy nature. Is that the tenor of the negotiations?
Yes, absolutely. I will say, for those that don't know, you know, we have 93,000 acres in the ag reserve, and there's a lot of farming. There's a lot of agriculture there. So that was a big part of it. But there's also a lot of equestrian, a lot of horse activity. Maryland is well known for their equestrian sports and trail rides, and they were at the table, and that was what was negotiated. And I was thankful to everybody because everybody gave a little and everybody got a little. So it was kind of a win-win-win.
Got it. Thank you very much. Delegate Lutke?
Thank you very much. And Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, I want to commend you for sticking with this issue, because it's, as those of us who've been working on deer issues for, you know, a decade now know, it's much more complex than it seems at first glance. But the bill itself, just to confirm, this is essentially a permanent extension of the pilot program that you helped negotiate with the broad group of stakeholders a couple of years ago, correct?
Yeah, 5 years ago. That's correct.
Okay. And have you heard since that pilot program has been in effect of any issues with interactions between hunters and other groups making use of public lands or private lands in the ag reserve that would lead us to believe that maybe this is not the way to go?
No, I haven't heard anything. And I mean, I think most of you know I live in Boyd, so there's a lot around here, and I haven't had any hunters or reach out to me. I haven't had anybody that has talked about any negative interactions at all. It's all been positive.
Cool. Well, great. Thank you very much. Thanks for bringing the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Kaiser?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, for bringing this. And both you and Delegate Lutke referred to the longtime issues we've dealt with this. For the benefit of our members who maybe haven't dealt with this as many times, in the past, there was questions by colleagues that were trying to find other alternatives to some of these selected deer kill opportunities. Is it true that all the efforts that we've done with birth control for deer have not worked?
That's my understanding. I mean, DNR has come out and said that this is the #1 way to control the deer population problem. That's what DNR said. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, that concludes the hearing on, I don't have the bill number in front of me. I think it's MC 2522.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very
2522.
much.
Thank you.
I turn it back over to Chair Corbin.
Chair Love, an excellent memory. Your committee is taking that bill up on Monday or Tuesday next week.
Can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Your microphone isn't picking up. You're very quiet.
Hey, Al, can you take over?
Yes, as the vice chair of this delegation, I'm in charge here. The next agenda item is MC
Thank
26.
you, Al Haig.
All of us Als, we have this tendency. So the next agenda item is MC 26-22. Delegate Carr, why is the bill late? So this bill is late because the need for this bill arose after the deadline. It has to do with redistricting in the special session for school board and the county council redistricting. So that's why the bill is late. Does anyone have any questions, or we will take a vote of whether to accept
Move
the bill as late
favorable.
filed?
Second.
Second.
All right. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? All right, it is unanimous. All those present in favor of accepting the bill as filed late. We have our Senator Van Hollen, who's now with us, and so we will now turn the floor over to our wonderful senator.
I'm not positive he's actually in yet, although Joan said he would be here shortly. So why don't we move on first to our special order bill, since I don't think the senator's here yet. And so I think that's back to Chair Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's throwing me, as much as I like you, Chair Corbin, I'm seeing two of you on my screen.
Sorry.
It's a little much for 10 a.m. in the morning.
I want you to have different angles.
Uh-oh, no, I lost both of you. At any rate, it was apologies that I was not here with you last week. I understand the bill was special ordered. Delegate Barbie, have all your questions been answered?
Yeah, my only question and concern was whether or not the placement of these devices would be politicized. I've been assured that they wouldn't, so I intend to vote for the bill.
Thank you very much. With that, Mr. Chair, I move the bill.
Great. Delegate Love moves the bill. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Delegate Barbie seconded. Any debate or discussion? Okay, I'm going to try to do this by voice vote. All those in favor of MC 1822, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody want to be recorded in the negative? Anybody want to abstain? Great, the bill passes, and thank you to the delegates who worked during the week to make that a unanimous vote once again. We appreciate it. Thank you, Chair Love. We'll now turn to the Metro Washington Area Committee report. Chair Carr.
I see that our senator has joined us, so I will turn the floor over to Senator Van Hollen.
Well, thank you, Delegate Carr. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, let me start by thanking you, and I think I saw the chairman of the delegation, Mark Corman, and I don't know if Senator Kramer's with us, the head of the Senate delegation, but let me just start by thanking all of you for all your amazing work during this really tough period of time. First, as we had to fight back against the previous, presidential administration, and you all stood up for Maryland. And then, of course, during the pandemic, it's been great to partner with you on so many important issues. And Joan Kleiman, who's our state director, has worked with many of you on direct constituent issues. And I just want to thank all of you. because you've been there for the people of Maryland during these really difficult times. And we look forward to continue to work with you. What I thought I would do is provide a brief update of, where we are and challenges ahead, then take your questions. I do want to end my remarks on the very important issue for all of us nationally of voting rights and what happened the other night in the United States Senate and the ongoing challenge and fight ahead. But let me just start with the efforts to provide emergency relief, both to fight the pandemic and deal with the economic fallout. And as I think, as all of you well know, we passed the American Rescue Plan just a little less than a year ago. President Biden signed it into law in March of last year, and that provided important relief in many ways. I mean, first of all, it helped deploy the vaccines much more quickly and in higher volumes and much more equitably, trying to channel more vaccines to community health centers, to trusted places in communities, including churches and other places of worship where people congregate. So we were able to get the vaccines deployed very quickly. Of course, our big challenge are the people who don't want to get vaccinated, and that's an ongoing challenge. And it's really shameful that what should be a health issue has become a political issue in so many places. The other big part of the American Rescue Plan, of course, was historic emergency economic relief, both directly to individuals, the individual payments of $1,400, help through the unemployment insurance system, through people who lost their jobs because of COVID, and then a whole range of other important measures going to institutions from our public school system, which received lots of important funding, to transit systems, including WMATA, which was essentially kept going during the last couple of years because of federal assistance, to assistance to directly to local governments, both counties and cities. And then importantly, I just want to focus on this as you all are now back into session, a huge amount of funds direct to the state of Maryland, over $3.7 billion to the state of Maryland, coming in two tranches. The first half of that money was already delivered. The other half will be on its way midsummer once Maryland, presents, the documentation as to how it's been spent. But I just mentioned that because the budget that you're going to be dealing with in Annapolis has contained in it lots of federal funding, and I would just urge all of you to suss it out, especially because the governor in Maryland opposed the American Rescue Plan and said he didn't want it. And now we as a federal delegation, I bring greetings also from Ben Cardin, as well as from Jamie Raskin and David Trone and John Sarbanes. We've been trying to follow the money because a lot of money is being allocated and spent without any recognition that these funds came through the federal government, and everything from some of the big state broadband initiatives to other initiatives that you're seeing on the healthcare front. So I would just urge you to help us recognize that you've been great partners. We've worked with you throughout this period of time, but I do think it's important that all of our constituents recognize that this is a joint effort that we had with you, and that there are many in the state that oppose the monies that are being spent, that they're now spending. With respect to, and that's just the 3.7 that came directly to the state. I just want to give you a sense of some other monies that went from the federal government through the state. So there's the rental assistance money. A lot of that went through the counties, like Montgomery County got its allocation, but so did the state of Maryland. I mean, the state of Maryland got over $204 million in rental assistance funds, okay? The state of Maryland got over $504 million for the child care development block grant. The state of Maryland got over $97 million for dealing with learning loss as a result of the pandemic. That's on top of monies that came directly to the Montgomery County school system and others. That's to the state. And then there are other pots of money. So both because I think it's important that people understand the source of the funds, but also because you want to make sure, I know, that they're allocated in a fair way for all Marylanders and Montgomery County residents. There's a huge amount of money that is right now in the executive branch of state government, where I think you have a direct interest in making sure you know how it's being spent in the smartest way. I recognize that in the Maryland budget system, the governor has enormous powers, but you also, of course, have the powers through the supplemental budget process. So let me just say quickly on WMATA, and I know Delegate Corman and many of you have worked a lot on WMATA. As I said, we provided lots of emergency funding. Another important thing that we did in the infrastructure modernization bill that passed was to extend the federal authorization for the $150 million a year. That had expired, so there was a risk that Congress would no longer provide the federal component. We still have to get the money every year, but that authorization is really important in that process. And all of us, I know, are working on the issue of the safety, WMATA safety issues, the 7,000 car series. I'm sure you saw Paul Wiedefeld is stepping down. I just spoke to him the other day, but we want to continue to work with you on Metro, both safety as well as making sure that we have a reliable system. On the Purple Line, I can report that the federal government is still providing its share for the Purple Line. I think a lot of us have been disappointed and alarmed at the mismanagement at the state level of the Purple Line. It's way over budget and way over time right now. It's now projected to be complete in the fall of 2026 and is now $9.3 billion, which is, again, way over budget. But the federal government, I hope there'll be some oversight on that process, but the federal government is continuing its the commitment that it made. That brings me to the infrastructure modernization bill. And again, there are going to be a lot of monies flowing through the state of Maryland. Some of them have already started. The highway funds have already started to flow. Over the next 5 years, there'll be $7 billion of federal funds coming to the state for everything from roads and bridges to transit to broadband to tunnels. So that all is going to flow through the state formula and through the State Department of Transportation. I urge all of you to make sure that the funds are spent wisely, because we know that this administration has taken a lot of the funds and used what I consider more political purposes. So I just want to mention that those funds are also beginning to travel through the system already and landing in the state coffers. Let me also, and I'm happy to go into any more detail on that if you're interested. We also are trying to deal with the other part of the Build Back Better agenda, as you know, trying to work to pass the bill to reduce the costs of childcare, reduce the costs of prescription drugs, provide universal early education, and deal with the climate issues. This is all part of the bill that still has not gotten over the finish line. Like the American Rescue Plan, unfortunately, we don't have any Republican support in the Senate or House for this. And so we're working to get every one of our members on board. And as you've seen, Senator Manchin has some continuing concerns, but we are working to try to get that done. The other issue I wanted to mention before voting rights, just briefly, is our current year appropriations. You're all going through your budget process. As you know, the federal fiscal year begins October 1st. And we just put the previous year's budget on automatic pilot because we weren't able to get bipartisan agreement on the next steps for this year's budget. That automatic pilot budget, the continuing resolution, expires February 18th. And so we're working right now to try to put in place a new budget that meets the priorities for this year. And that will include some, if we're finally able to get back to direct federal funding of local projects, so earmarks, and we're working to try to address those across the state, including many in Montgomery County. So that's just a whirlwind update of some of the fiscal issues. Let me close with voting rights. I was really disappointed in the outcome just the other night. And as you know, we had two major bills, the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Enhancement Act. The first bill is designed to essentially preempt the actions taken by 19 state legislatures around the country today to pass laws to make it harder for people to vote, and specifically targeting voters of color and younger voters. That is the clear design of these laws around the country. So we wanted to establish uniform national standards for equal fair access to the ballot box. That bill also included, and I think it's important given the debate in Annapolis right now, it included nationwide nonpartisan drawing of congressional districts. So it would get rid of gerrymandering on a national level, which is the way you really have to do it if you don't want to give one party an advantage over the other in terms of the total representation in the House. So this was a proposal to do nonpartisan nationwide congressional district drawing. It also includes something that I've been fighting for years. I was the original author when I was in the House of the Disclose Act, which would get rid of secret money in politics, right? All those corporate entities, 501c4s that can spend literally billions, unlimited amount of money without telling the voters who they are. So the Disclose Act provides transparency and accountability. It would require people, spending that money on that ads to tell you who at least behind them, so voters have a right to know. So those are some of the other reform measures that were in the Freedom to Vote Act. We did have every Democrat in the Senate on those bills. It took us a little while, but we had everybody on the bill. But because of the Senate rules, and these are rules that I've been working to change, in the Senate, in order even to vote on the Freedom to Vote Act, you don't even get to the vote unless you get 60 out of 100 votes. That's the current version of the Senate filibuster rule. It's a supermajority requirement to get to that. And even though we have carve outs for things I mentioned, like the American Rescue Plan, even though Trump tax cuts passed with reconciliation with a pure party line majority vote, despite that, we don't have any kind of exception for things to protect our democracy. In fact, we should we should reform this rule to allow lots of debate, but ultimately a majority vote. In any event, as you saw, we have two members of our caucus who, while they're on the bills to protect voting rights, did not want to reform our rules. So we're going to have to keep at that going forward. In the meantime, we're just going to have to press ahead around the country to ensure that voters understand the rules of the game, and of course what's at stake in these upcoming elections. So let me close there. Again, thank you all for what you're doing, even in these really challenging times of COVID. It's been great to partner with you. I'm joined on this call by Joan Kleiman, who's our state director. We've worked with many of you on specific constituent matters. All of us have, I'm sure, been flooded with constituent matters, including things like the broken state unemployment insurance system. And Joan's with me here, and you may not have heard, but Joan, after many years of great service to our 8th congressional district of the state, is now going to be stepping down to spend more time with her grandchildren. We're going to miss her dearly, but I just wanted to thank her publicly while all of you are with us.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. If my colleagues have questions, they can use their raise hand function. And of course, while we're waiting, let me just, I think on behalf of all of us, thank Joan, District 16's Joan Kleinman, for all of her efforts and work. She's been an incredible pipeline to your office, both when you were a Congress member and now as a U.S. Senator. So thank you, Joan, so much for everything you have done for all of us. Let me turn it over to the chair of the Senate delegation, Senator Kramer.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. And Senator Van Hollen, thank you for being here. And thank you for your public service, sir. You are an outstanding representative for those of us who live here in Maryland. And I just want to quickly say your point about Governor Hogan not supporting taking the federal funds and then doing victory laps with his budget as a consequence of the Democrats on Capitol Hill bailing out and saving our states is worth repeating. It's not something that is new to this governor. He often will oppose and even veto legislation that comes out of our legislature. And then when the vetoes are overridden, he's out there taking credit for the work that this legislature does. And I think it's very important that we start focusing on his rhetoric. And just quickly, yesterday on the Senate floor, in response to the Senate passing the new legislative redistricting maps, I was compelled to take some time on the floor to share with the public the truth about the hyper-partisan rhetoric coming from Governor Hogan and the administration about the legislative maps and their hyper-partisan claims that this was somehow done in back rooms when in fact this red herring commission that the governor appointed that everyone knew from the get-go would go nowhere, was in fact appointed by this governor with no one having, and no one ever will know, the conversations that went on between this governor and those commissioners and what their charge was for them to be doing. So I spent some time having that conversation because I think it is important for all of us to be correcting the record when Larry Hogan is out there making these claims. And I think it's important for all of us in our efforts to support you, Senator Van Hollen, that we are correcting that record. And again, thank you very much for your service and the work you do. And we want to keep you on Capitol Hill doing that work. So thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Senator Kramer. Thank you for all the work you're doing. And thank you for your efforts to hold everyone accountable for misstatements and distortions that are made. And I want to underscore the fact that for congressional districting anyway, at the national level, as I said, it's important that everyone in the state, as they hear about the redistricting debates, recognize that that bill that we tried to pass had nationwide nonpartisan drawing of congressional lines. Unfortunately, we didn't have a single Republican senator in support of that idea, along with the other measures.
Thank you, Senator Kramer and Senator Van Hollen. Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, it's great to see you as always. And I just wanted to start off by saying thank you. I know you mentioned childcare. Not only have you been a champion, obviously, in the Senate, but your office has been just an amazing partner in working with the ineptitude of the current administration to get things out for our childcare providers. I wanted to make sure you knew how much we appreciated the support and the backstop on that. And same thing on rail. You've been such a champion, and that's what I just wanted to ask you a quick question about, or sort of give you a heads up. I know your office and you and Senator Cardin have been just great partners in trying to push sort of the bigger vision pieces. And as you mentioned, I think one of the frustrations we've had with this administration is the lack of overriding vision on sort of big once in a generation projects. As we work to expand the MARC regional rail system, I think we're continually troubled that MDOT and MTA don't seem to have those sort of once in a generation projects on their list. And we know there's billions of dollars available. So just as much as you can to help us kind of continue to push the administration forward so that we can get, things like an additional track on the Brunswick line or an additional track on the Penn line. I know things you've been fighting for a long time, but now we actually have federal resources available to potentially make that happen.
Well, Delegate Solomon, first of all, thank you for all your work on this. And you're right, it's an area of deep frustration that the Maryland transportation plans have definitely shortchanged both transit and rail. Commuter rail, regional rail, MARC train. And so these federal funds are an opportunity to address that. I look forward to working with you. We worked with some folks in the sort of Southern Maryland delegation, the Charles County delegation, some time ago, where a bill was introduced to direct the Department of Transportation to begin spending money on the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit System, right? And you do have the power, again, to mandate programs, and obviously you need the votes to do it. But I would, that is an example of a project that we now hope will also be funded with these federal infrastructure funds that was sort of forced its way into the MDOT budget as a result of legislation. You're absolutely right. You've seen a real draining of resources dedicated to transit and rail, and I hope in the coming years we'll have more cooperation, from the future governor's office in this regard. I mean, this is of course the Montgomery County delegation, but the governor pulled the plug on over $1 billion in federal funding for the Red Line in Baltimore City. And that money, the folks in California were very happy to get it for their systems, but and that was a great loss for the state and that region. Really, I'd argue for all of us. So, but to your larger point, yeah, let's work together. Again, you've got this huge amount of money coming to the state in the coming years, and so let's make sure we work together to direct it in the best possible use.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Delegate Solomon. Delegate Palakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator. I will echo my colleagues' praise of your excellent public service on behalf of Marylanders. I wanted to ask about the child tax credit and any information you might be able to share in terms of where that stands in the current negotiations around what's left of the Build Back Better plan.
Yeah, and thank you for all your work, including around childcare. Before I get to the child tax credit, it was mentioned the Build Back Better plan would make a huge difference for families when it comes to the cost of childcare. The bottom line in that legislation is it would ensure that no family pays more than 9% of their income for childcare. And as you know, for so many families right now, it's 20, 30, 40, way up there percent of income. And we've just got to address that. I mean, people talk about infrastructure. I mean, parents need to make sure that their kids are in a safe and secure and affordable place. So, and we are continuing to work to get the extension of the child tax credit through. It's shameful in my view that it expired in the middle of this month. So we are having conversations with other Democratic senators. As I said, it's a challenge when you don't get any help from the other side. So we obviously need every member of the Democratic caucus in the Senate to support this effort. But it's a tax cut for families with kids, and it provided, as you know, up to $300 per child for families, and is a really important economic lifeline to folks who are living paycheck to paycheck. And that is why we are very focused on trying to salvage at least part of it going forward. So we're having conversations as to how we can preserve the core of it, even if we have to make some changes. But thanks for raising it.
Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Senator. I do not see any other questions. Colleagues, last call. We have a question from a witness on one of our bills. I'm going to let her follow up with the Senator's office offline. And any other questions from any of the legislators? Great. Well, Senator, thank you for all your work and being with us today. I have to say, as someone who works in a very productive environment in Annapolis, I sometimes marvel that you all can persevere the way you do in the environment you're doing it in. So thank you for working so hard on our behalf. We really appreciate it. And thank you again to Joan.
Thank you, Chair Corman, and again, let me just, in closing, thank all of you for your great work over the last couple of years and before, but obviously dealing with the pandemic has been a special challenge for you to continue to deliver results for all of our constituents during this time. But you've done it, and it's been great to be a partner with you, and thank you. And again, thank you also, all of you who work with Joan on the many constituent services, and I'm grateful to her for her service. So hopefully we'll see you in Annapolis during the session. Have a very productive 90 days.
Thank you, Senator. Sticking with our Kensington theme here, let me turn it back to Chair Carr for his local committee report.
Thank you, Chair Corman. The Metro Washington Area Committee has 2 bills to report out. For the first one, I will hand the reins over to the Vice Chair, Charkoudian.
Thank you, chairs. So the first bill, sorry, let me just pull this up, is PGMC 103-22, and this is the ethics certification of compliance for the bi-county commissions. The bill requires the bi-county commissions certify ethical compliance, and we passed it favorable with an amendment. And forgive me, I actually don't know. Do we need to pass the amendment again here? Okay, so then what this amendment does is it adds the terms may be modified to the extent necessary to make the regulation relevant to the bi-county commission. So it essentially takes all of the state standard ethics rules, but allows for modification depending on the commission and what work it focuses on. So I would move, would someone move the amendment?
You can move the amendment, Delegate.
I can move the amendment. I'm moving the amendment.
Delegate Charkoudian moves the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Delegate Lukey seconds. Any discussion on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone want to be recorded in opposition? Anybody abstaining? The amendment's adopted. Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you. On behalf of the committee, I move the bill as amended.
Second.
Delegate Charkoudian moves the bill. Delegate Lukey seconds. Is there any discussion on the bill? Okay, all in favor of PGMC 103-22, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody want to be abstain? Great, the bill is adopted. Thank you, Delegate Charkoudian. I think we're back to Chair Carr.
All right, thank you, Chair Corman. The second bill that we reported out is PGMC 109-22, WSSC Plumbing and Fuel Gas Services, Licenses and Penalties. This bill came out unanimously from the committee with no amendments. There's no opposition. The bill was requested by WSSC, and by way of explanation, WSSC is the regulatory authority for plumbers within their service territory. In other parts of the state takes on that role, or Baltimore County takes on that role in Baltimore County, but they wanted to update their the penalties, for someone who might be doing plumbing work but failed to obtain a license, et cetera, to better match what the state rules and penalties are. So I will move favorable on the bill.
Thank you. Chair Carr moves the bill. Delegate Lukey seconds. Any discussion on the bill? Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Anyone want to record an abstention? Great. Okay, the bill passes. Thank you, Chair Carr. Colleagues, first of all, apologies for my technical issues today. I'll try to get it fixed for next week. Also, speaking of next week, please keep an eye on your email because we may start early in order to accommodate some of our speakers next week. People we want to hear from who have difficult schedules. We may start a little earlier than normal. With that, let's do committee announcements. Chair Chi.
Thank you, Chair Coleman. The Economic, the Economic Development Committee will meet one more time this coming Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. Y'all welcome to join, and we're going to continue to work on and hopefully vote out MC 822 about business improvement districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Land Use Committee will meet on Monday, and I also encourage those of you who haven't filled out the doodle poll to fill it out so we can lock in our standing time. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair Shetty.
Thank you, Chair Corman. The Education, Elections, and Housing Committee will have a work session on Tuesday morning at 10 a.m., I believe, to discuss the data aggregation bill that we heard today, as well as Delegate Carr's landlord license bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Carr.
Metro Washington Area Committee will not meet. We appear to have completed our work for the session.
Excellent. Bonus points for Chair Carr. Excellent. Are there any other announcements? Great. Well, I believe with that, we are adjourned.